Chutzpah and Soul, bold resistance to the dominant culture in memory of Lenny Bruce. First person stories, rants, essays, interviews and dialogues, and group catharsis. Laced with irony, parody, and satire, where the stance of chutzpah and the spirit of soul come together, celebrating the Jewish and African diasporas. If Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor were still alive, they'd applaud chutzpah and soul. Join us. So, with me in studio right now is a friend of mine, Xiao Pei, who is from China originally and is a member of Boston Toastmasters Club that I'm involved in. And he's definitely an iconic guy, and I like him for that. He's got a very fertile mind, and he speaks fast.
A little bit about myself. My name's Xiaofei Jiang. I'm an industry analyst. I live in Boston, originally from China, but
Which city again?
Beijing.
Yeah,
I was
right.
born and raised in Beijing. Then we moved to the U.S. I went to high school in Montana. Then moved to Boston. Went to school here. Moved to California and worked there for a few years and came back. I've been here ever since. New York is always interesting. New York has a lot of animal spirit, but at the same time is also very regulated city. So
Tell me about the animal spirit.
people have very short attention. If you talk to girls over there, you kind of have always to pull out some big shiny object to keep their attention.
What's the shiniest thing you were able to pull out?
Oh, usually has to be something funny
Okay.
or something demonstrate your value. I find that's very typical for Americans. Could be something funny, something shocking,
Okay.
something get people's attention. Remember
Yeah.
when I was young, when I was in elementary school, that was back in China, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen the same thing. You see the same
Yeah.
pattern with a younger generation in
In
China.
China. Yeah.
I remember we were never really left. We were left alone.
Yeah.
We get a string. You string the key around your neck, right? And you go to school. You go back to school on your own. You get
Yeah.
to your own, make your own lunch or whatever. Your parents maybe it was free ranging,
Yeah.
child raising.
Yeah.
Now is more helicopter
Totally.
child
Right.
raising. It
Right.
is a very yeah. I actually I have to agree.
Yeah. Hey, ring a bell or something. Somebody agree with me. Okay. No, no, this is good. So now we've got this thing, but now we're saying that no matter what kind of job we have, that we're actually susceptible to being fired because of somebody observing something that has nothing to do with work. So the
Oh,
idea,
yeah, absolutely.
So then, therefore, we're never not at work. Therefore, we're never not at work, and therefore, there's no liberty. And once you have no private life, once there is no such thing as private life, that is absolute guarantee of a totalitarian society. All the what do you call it? Not utopias, the dystopian novels, 1984, Animal Farm, all of the famous books written about utopias, which is the idea of a perfect society, gone opposite, right?
Right.
Are always about that. They're always about where there's no distinction, where your life is being observed and controlled all the time. And so if people in important jobs like yourself are holding themselves to that standard, okay, then you've already absorbed, you've already internalized the brainwashing that has gone on. You've already internalized it. So you're already not free.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Remember Robespierre from
The French Revolution.
From the French Revolution.
Yeah.
He was the one who said, "Hey, you're a counter-revolutionist. The king must die."
Yeah.
Do you know what happened to him later on?
Was he guillotined too?
He tried to commit suicide.
Yeah.
The guns back then weren't very. So he blew off half of his jaw, and they dragged him with a broken jaw to the guillotine and cut his fucking head off.
Okay.
All right. And we are actually seeing some of the people who start the Me Too movement and
Yeah.
the people on the left, they are getting,
They're extremists.
yeah, Al Franken.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
know.
see why he
No, of
had
course.
to lose his job.
course.
I don't think that's fair.
No, of course
no,
not.
it's getting to a
Insane thing. Yeah.
It's insanity.
Right. It's eating up itself.
Right.
That's what always happens when people are extremists. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter which side they're extremists, right? But the bigger picture, though, is the idea that because we don't have enough countervailing sources of power, like we have hardly any labor unions in the United States. You know,
No, we don't.
We only have 11% of private non-public employees, private sector employees. Only 11% are unionized. It used to be about 30%. In all
yeah.
other countries, like Israel used to be 90%. I'm not sure what's that now, but Western Europe, 80%, 70%. The labor movement has some power still. Okay, so if you're not working for the public sector has a large percentage of unions. But if you're working in the private sector, which most people are, right, you have very little recourse for being fired. All right. So there are laws, but they're not enforced, right? So clearly people have fear about holding on to their jobs, right? And like just what you're saying, if I talk in Johnny's living room on what's today? May 10th.
I hope I'm not getting fired for
May
this.
11th, May 11th, right? And you talk about this conference in New York City, somebody might hear, somebody, blah, 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 da-da-da, And what about, how did people used to meet for partnerships, for romantic partnerships back in the day, and not that far back? How did people generally meet to fall in love back in the day? At work, God damn it. Doctors married nurses, professors married students.
Right.
Everybody, it was always through work, not always.
It was definitely, back then people made it because they sexually harassed each other.
No.
Let's put it that way.
No.
I'm not, okay, fine. Maybe it was a little bit, but by today's definition.
Yeah,
by
because today's definition has
they
gone out,
sexually
right,
harass
right.
each other and get married.
Right. So you want to have HR
No.
people running the world? So how are people going to meet each other now? So we've restricted everything. So it has to be online. Let's move on to mothers.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell me about Mom. And you said that your grandmother just died, Shafet.
Yes, my grandmother just passed away a few weeks ago. My mom was there.
Was that in China?
I was in
Yeah,
Beijing, yes.
Beijing,
My
yeah.
mom had to fly back. Was able to spend a couple days with her. But my grandmother had dementia for the last 10, 15 years.
So did my mother.
Yeah.
And you were around that. You've witnessed that, right?
No, I wasn't. I was here.
Oh, you never saw her during those last 10 years?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. But I didn't really, every time I go back to visit, I didn't really stay at her place for the last few years because you have to keep on repeating yourself.
Of
She'll
course.
ask you one thing. So every time I go back, because I'm not married, she would ask me, "Oh, are you married? Do you have kids?" And you tell her, "No, I'm not married. I don't have kids." 10 minutes later, she asks you again.
Right.
And then 20 minutes later, she'll ask you again. So it can be, it was psychologically, it was a little bit hard to take.
Yeah.
Right? Because people ask you, "You're not married, how come?" Then keep on going and going and going.
So what if you had told her,
Yeah,
I tried to
I-
pull out shiny objects in New York and it still doesn't work. If you told her all the
Well,
struggles you have, I'm joking, of course.
Yeah. I don't think she, for her generation is just very different.
Yeah.
So my grandmother came from a really, really well-to-do family.
Oh,
She married my grandfather. My grandfather was a banker in China
okay. Before the revolution.
before the revolution. And after 1949?
49. 49 was
Was
the
it
revolution.
49? Yes,
Yeah.
49. After the Communist Party took over, he continued for a while. But then, the political movement, he was sent to a labor camp in Siberia.
Oh, was that during the cultural?
For 20, it was before, actually it was before. It was actually, he was lucky. He probably would have been killed during the Cultural Revolution.
So this happened before the Cultural Revolution?
Yes, he
Okay.
was, because he was in Siberia for about 20 20 or 25 years. And that's kind of like the Chinese, the Asian culture, that strength, the tenacity for them to survive
Yeah.
and to thrive.
Stoicism. It's a kind of
Yes.
stoicism.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of the experience of that, and saw my mom and my aunt, her older sister, went down very different paths. One of them, my aunt sort of like told us to adopt, I'm going to fight this thing. I'm going to be this and this. My
Like
mom,
more rebellious, kind of rebellious.
rebellious. She was more rebellious, she's outgoing. She embraces conflict.
Oh, yeah.
And she will, and she'll work she'll network, she'll work the system. She ended up running. She was running operations for a very large, a pretty like a few thousand, 20,000 people company in China before she be in Beijing before we retired. My mom, where she just avoided the conflict
Yeah.
throughout. He also went through a pretty tough life. He was in the Korean War on the Chinese side
Oh, wow.
when he
Yeah.
was at a very, very young age.
Yeah. Right.
He wasn't a combatant. He
Was he a medic or something?
was a medic.
Okay.
He saw a lot of shit.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
probably traumatic experience.
Yes.
But kind of very similar to a lot of the war veterans here when they talk about what did you miss the most? It's the camaraderie.
Yes. Yeah.
He really missed that
Yeah.
when he finally went to college. After college, he met my mom in China, etc., etc. So I would say my dad also, but he just, the generation was. I think the fact that he grew up in the army, like a very young age,
Yeah.
like 12 or 13 years old,
Whoa.
and without that sense of family,
Yeah.
family setting.
Yes.
So emotionally, he was always a little bit more. Seems very detached.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just imagine, and close your eyes maybe
Okay.
for a moment, and imagine bringing your parents to Toastmasters, just like, Kristen brought her father, I think it was,
God,
right?
I-
Yeah, just close your eyes for a minute. Okay, this Toastmasters group,
I wouldn't.
well, hold on, don't answer yet. Okay, I want you to imagine it. This Toastmasters group is extremely international, incredibly diverse group. So that would not, I'm just telling the audience, all right, before we talk directly, I'm telling the masses out there, right? You heard that term, the masses, growing up in China
Yes.
a million times. I had some communist relatives who used that word, overused that word. So the masses out there who are listening, who are going to hear this show, need to know that this place that I'm asking Xiaopei whether he would bring his lovely parents, I've never met, who live in Brookline, which is a really nice suburb next to Boston, whether he would bring them, invite them for one time, not to join, just one time to Toastmasters in Boston. And the location of the Boston Toastmasters, right across the street from the Boston Public Library. The collective we, the masses, have asked Xiaofei to close his eyes and imagine a best case scenario, a realistic scenario of inviting and having his parents come to a Toastmasters. Voila. Go ahead.
I would say that my dad would definitely not come, for sure. My mom possibly. Her
Well, what
English
would you
is
want
not-
to give what would you give? Yeah, would you give a specific, special kind of speech?
I'll probably give the mother speech.
Okay.
I'll do it.
All
Yeah,
right.
I think that would be good.
Have you done the mother speech or
I've
what
done the mother speech way, way long
time ago?
time ago. Yeah,
Did you like doing it?
it was good. My aunt tried. I always told her no, whatever. But anyway, that's a different story.
Okay.
Me and my mom, I think we talked a lot more.
You opened up more to her.
Yeah, like we were more like white people.
Yeah, right.
Oh, away, right?
Yeah.
I just to
Yeah,
use
yeah, that's
we
all
were
right.
more like a white people, kind of like yeah.
Yeah.
It's more.
I got that.
And she told me that how scared she was when she had to teach. For me, her story really shows us how adaptive, how strong people can be,
Yeah.
and a lot of times we have a lot more in us than we're giving ourselves the credit for. And going back to the kids nowadays, that's I think the safety.
Yeah.
That is we're not throwing them out there
Right.
to let them just like you just like in the superhero movies, right? You
Yeah.
kind of you get like that the last moment you get your superpower is when you're about to die.
Yes.
And you get it, and that's how you push yourself to that to evolve and to transcend. But if we're always keep ourselves safe, we don't allow us to be hurt, to be embarrassed, to hit on women who says, "Hey, I am not your fat and ugly or old or whatever. I don't date Asian guys or whatever." If we are not throwing them out there to get
experience that.
rejected,
Yeah,
to get rejected.
Yeah.
Like that's what is. That's I think that's a harder thing about emotionally with a lot of kids nowadays. Is like we got to learn how to get rejected. It's
agree.
such a huge value add.
Definitely. No, I
Yeah.
agree. Before there was Car Talk, before Susan Stanberg of NPR fell in love with Tom and Ray, and she told the world, hey, before there was even a Good News Garage, the place that they ran for many years, no, dinosaurs were not roaming the earth. It wasn't that far back. But me and guys like me with 1972 Dodge Darts were trying to do DIY, do it yourself, auto mechanics through the holy refuge of Tom and Ray's Hackers Haven DIY garage in Cambridge, our fair city, circa 1975. In other words, before they got Car Talk, before they got Good News Garage. Okay, people out in podcast land, raise your hands if any of you go back that far with Tom and Ray, back to Hackers Haven, pre-Good News Garage. Why didn't it work? Why didn't Hackers Haven last? Because what happened was most of the people who showed up were Jewish mechanics like me and Don and other folks with 72 Dodge Darts, and Tom and Ray ended up doing all the work anyway. So what you did in a Hackers Haven place, a self-service garage, and there were a number of them that spread across the country, and I don't think any of them lasted, was you rented a space, you could get a lift, you could get tools, oil changes, do simple things. Maybe people did more than simple things, but it wasn't a good business plan, so it didn't last. And the whole DIY thing on the broader scale, on the macro scale, really began because of the Arab oil embargo, which had started in 74. The Arab oil embargo came as a result of the 1973 Arab-Israeli war, and that's when lines started happening at gas stations, and that's when gas stations went completely to self-service, except in New Jersey, which requires full service. Self-service gas stations was the beginning of a trend that hasn't stopped. And I don't mind, of course I don't mind it, it's easy to do, but hey, once in a while you do actually pull up, even in Massachusetts, to a full-service gas station, and somebody pumps your gas, cleans your windshield. In the old days, back in the day, they would check your oil, they would do other things. Most of you out there in podcast land have no idea. There were not dinosaurs roaming the earth at that time. There were actually people at gas stations helping you out. And what's the advantage of having somebody at a gas station help you out? Well, it gives you a chance to relax, my God, to not be under the gun all the time. And sometimes when I'm pumping gas, I get pretty weird about math sometimes. And I'm not great at math, but I'm good at calculating simple arithmetic things. Like, when it hits $10, I can multiply by 3 for a $30 purchase and know how many gallons are going in, blah, blah. And then I started thinking about, what if I was like ultra rich? What if I was on the level of Warren Buffett? Well, he wouldn't pump his own gas. What if I was on the level of, somebody at a pretty high level, somebody just a multimillionaire, not a billionaire. And if I was pumping my own gas and would I stay to the very end when it slows down on those last, 10 seconds, the last, tiny bits of gas being pumped so that you get the full amount of what you've ordered, okay? Would I stay? Even if it took, an extra 10 seconds and I calculate Well, 10 seconds would equal how much money that I'd be earning, blah, blah, blah. So I started getting into weird calculations like that when thinking about the whole DIY thing. But this is daring to say in a country setting in New England or in a suburb of New England where self-sufficiency is next to God. No, it's not next to God. It's above God. So let's examine this. Let's say you're just a regular middle-class human being. Well, sorry. There's no more middle class in the USA. So you're just a human with time constraints like all of us, okay? Human being with time constraints. You got that? So now, with your not smartphone, but let's say you've got a genius phone, you are proud to be your own, here's the list, executive secretary, you're your own accountant, your own travel agent, your own attorney for contracts and so forth, medical diagnostician, both for physical and mental health issues, your own physical trainer, dietitian, disc jockey for music choices, social planner for self and your whole Facebook family, creator of unique greeting cards and gift wrapper, and maybe you're even a tailor and shoe repair guy too. Somehow, can you do that with your smartphone? Maybe not. So look at all those jobs that have been eliminated, all in name of progress and efficiency, all in the name of progress and efficiency. And you'd think that prices would have dropped radically on things like airlines with all the middle people cut out, with all the middlemen cut out, with all those layers of, you'd think that prices would have dropped. But no. And my father, my late father, who was an economist and a professor, he said to me when he was 95 years old, quote, it's free labor for the corporations. All this thing we're proud of being DIY, we're just doing free labor for the corporations. And they're not passing on the savings to us at all. And they're not passing on the profits at all, okay? So I'm really glad that Ray and the late Tom Magliozzi evolved as they did in every respect. They evolved in so many ways. But they went out of the DIY thing and they realized that giving service at a high level was a great thing to do. And I went to Tom's funeral in Cambridge, our fair city, about 6 years ago. And I want to say that at the funeral, I sat behind Doug Berman, the famous producer, and Ray's eulogy, Ray, the younger brother of Tom, focused on how Tommy was about 11 years his senior. His brother was 11 years older, and he took Ray to classes at MIT when Ray was in elementary school. So lifelong mentor, brother, best friend. Hey, DIY is not enough for anyone. Memphis, Tennessee is a place I wanted to go to for years, especially after the song Graceland by Paul Simon, which I consider to be a national song. I believe it captures America in incredible depth. I wanted to go for years with Gabriella, my daughter. We never made it, but I made it. This past February 2019, just after my birthday, and I had to drive there. I decided to drive there. And I arrived in Memphis, Tennessee, on a Thursday afternoon, going straight to Stax Museum / Stax Record Company. Why did I go straight to Stax prior to going to my hotel? Because I had grown up absolutely in love by the age of about 15, through my teen years and beyond, with the one and only, and I mean one and only, Otis Redding. I was trying to sing, impossible to capture his song Change Gonna Come, which he didn't do the original version. The original was written by Sam Cooke. I found that out later. And it is also a political song as well as being about a personal transformation song. And I'm trying to sing that in Marblehead, Massachusetts, back in about circa 1966, while my peers were singing songs by the association, very white songs. And I'm trying to sing Change Gonna Come by Otis Redding. So I went straight to Stax Museum, Stax Record Company, which is in a neighborhood. Well, there's outdoor murals everywhere, and there's a big sign that says Soulville, a section of Memphis. Turns out to be sort of a lower middle class black neighborhood. And next to the Stax Museum, which has an outdoor sign looking like an Art Deco movie theater, next door to that is a major music center, music school, that's run by the foundation, which I found out later, that's part of the Stax Museum. So I enter the Stax Museum about an hour and 15 minutes before it's going to close. It closes at 5. I go through the exhibits, and I see a lot of stuff that just turns me on and so forth. I don't think I saw everything. I see the movie at the end, 20-minute movie, and I'm just really turned on to Otis Redding. So who else had been recorded at Stax? Many, many, many people, including Otis, of course, Sam and Dave, Aretha Franklin, briefly, before she went up and joined up with Atlantic Records, or was it Columbia? Either Atlantic or Atlantic. And Atlantic ended up buying Stax, and we'll mention about that in a minute. Solomon Burke, I don't remember what he did, but I love the name. And Van Morrison has mentioned his name in a lot of songs. Just the name Solomon Burke. How can you do better than that? Booker T and the MGs, who were like a house band there. They were local. And Steve Cropper, who was a member of that, was a white guy member of a black band. He was a producer. He was a major figure at Stax. So Stax included Vault label and a bunch of other labels. And eventually Atlantic Records purchased it. And Jerry Wexler, who was the brother of a friend of my father's, his name was Arthur Wexler from Lexington. Anyway, Jerry Wexler and Ahmet Ertuğrul, who was Turkish American, they owned Atlantic Records, and they bought out Stax. Then they sold it, whatever. It turns out that Stax really started going south, going out of business after the Martin Luther King killing. And that also had an effect on a lot of things in Memphis, which was 68, but Stax went out of business in about 74, I think. One of the things that has been motivating me for years, I don't mean I wake up in the middle of the night, but it's on my, forget bucket list, that's a bullshit term. It's on my aspiration. It's an aspiration that I want to be a catalyst, at least, for a feature film, not a documentary, but a feature film, not a TV film, but a widely released, major feature film about Otis Redding. Now, there have been great films, really damn good films made about Ray Charles, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and Tina Turner. And what I assume has held back, and I've read that there were efforts underway at various times to make a film about Otis Redding. And I'll mention that again in a second. What I think is the biggest obstacles, how could you find a actor who could capture and channel something close to his voice? His voice is just so unique, so capturing the absolute essence of black soul life in the South, Mississippi Delta area. He was from Georgia, but how would you capture that? It'd just be unbelievably hard to audition and find the right person to play Otis Redding. But it needs to be made. Flash forward back to Stax Records, Stax Museum, and I'm walking out after seeing the film, and I'm really turned on. I'm feeling great. And a white guy, tall, really good looking, well dressed, is walking in. Then I start talking to this guy, and this guy said he was coming in for a board meeting of the foundation. What foundation? Foundation that runs Stax Museum, the music school, and one other thing. And he was a lawyer, possibly Jewish, grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and was the exact same age as me. And he looked so fucking good. So for a moment, I wasn't ashamed of being 68 years old, which I had just turned a few days before. Literally 3 days before. So I'm 68, he's 68, he's looking great. I jokingly said, can I go to the board meeting? And then he tells me what I needed to do right then and there was to go diagonally across the street to this building that was a indoor rock climbing center. And I'm thinking to myself, what's so special about that? They're everywhere. My daughter, Gabby, was great at that. And I've taken her to a bunch of places, indoor, outdoor, whatever. But he said, no, it's more than just a rock climbing place. It's a community center. So I follow his suggestion, and I go diagonally across the street, and there's a huge event going on. So we're talking about that this Memphis thing ended up being this incredible welcoming of Johnny Golden to Memphis, as though I was destined to be in Memphis, as though they were rolling out the red carpet. That doesn't happen to me, man. Okay, not very much. Go across the street. Get into this. Oh, they let me in for free, whatever was going on. I went right over to where people were starting to sit down, and there was also all this food being served. And I didn't go right to the food. I went to find a seat, and I sat down and found out what was about to happen. And what was about to happen was a guy named Brian Banks. Brian Banks was happening. Remember that name, Brian Banks. And remember, Brian Banks was happening. So Brian Banks was the star of this event. The event was put on by this organization that's called One Memphis, and the sign on the door of that place called Memphis Rocks, ROX. So it's much more than a rock climbing place. It's a community center, and it's a center created to break down segregation, essentially. And Memphis is quite segregated, and Memphis is basically just black and white, blacks and whites, and a majority black city. But, whites are more powerful, whites have had the power and so forth. But there's not a lot of other ethnic groups. It's not international the way cities that I know better are. So the guy who created this center was a filmmaker living in Malibu and making films such as Ace Ventura, Patch Adams, The Nutty Professor, Bruce Almighty, and so forth. These were all grade B comedies. And he was making a lot of money. And then he had a serious, major, life-transforming bicycle accident. And while he was recovering, he had some kind of, magic moment, light bulb moment. And he ended up moving. No, after the accident, I think he rode a bike across the world or something. And then he ended up locating himself to Memphis. I don't know all the details of that. And in Memphis, he created this community center that has a real mission. And he spoke at this event, and he was absolutely brilliant. And Brian Banks spoke at the event, too. Brian Banks is a person and is also the subject of a feature film that Tom Shadyac, the director I just talked about, directed. So he got seduced back into film directing, even though he had sworn off of it. But this is a film that's not a grade B comedy. It's, I guess, a serious, I haven't seen it. It's going to open nationwide in August. It's been reviewed positively by Hollywood Reporter and Variety. in limited release. And Tom Shadyac directed it. And the film was shot in Memphis and in Hollywood, and is about the story of Brian Banks. And the people came to the event, kids and parents, they all knew about Brian Banks, even though it's not a famous name. And I've checked on that. And Brian Banks was a football player, an all pro football player in high school in Long Beach, California, and was wrongly accused of rape by a fellow student and was arrested, prosecuted, put in jail, put through the criminal justice system for 10 years before the California Innocence Project that has found people who've been convicted post-conviction and been able to undo the convictions and get people released. And they did that for Brian Banks. And apparently Brian Banks played a little bit in the NFL, and then he was a consultant to the NFL. And he spoke like just eloquently, like he's a brilliant guy. He's into psychology, he's into coaching, psychological coaching or life coaching. And he stated that he told the NFL, he instructed the NFL that they needed to insist that all football coaches at every level be also life coaches, meaning they understand human relations, they understand family issues, they understand all the stuff that we've been reading about. And he was like really inspiring. Tom Shadyac was really inspiring. And this beautiful woman sitting in front of me was really inspiring. And after the talk, now was an open, reception, blah, blah. And I get up and I start talking to her. And she turned out to have been a unit publicist for the film and is also a major communications consultant and runs her own communications company and so forth. She introduces me to a lot of people. One of the people that I'd seen just an hour before was Alan Bell, one of the former CEOs and presidents of Stax Records. And he's a very distinguished looking guy, tall, very handsome, elderly black gentleman, very well dressed. I get introduced to him. People take photographs of me with him. I get into this whole large group photograph of people connected. Tom Shadyac is in there. This guy named Reggie is an executive director of the community center, and Tom Shadyac is kind of the maybe president and inspirational guru. It was just an incredible photograph of people all, together. And I'm in the photograph. And then I get to talk to Sherry at some length. That was the woman. And then I meet this young Iranian American, very young, in his 20s, who's a poet and a rap artist and stuff and works at the center. I'm just meeting all these people, like just instantly. And I'm in seventh heaven. I'm in seventh heaven. And I leave there and go to the hotel, a Holiday Inn, near Beale Street, with the famous street where B.B. King, there's a B.B. King club, and Beale Street was always the traditional blues soul place in Memphis. I went to Memphis for two reasons. For the music, specifically soul music especially, and blues, but soul especially, and for black women. And I ended up having good experiences with both. When I walked in the hotel, right away, there was this very attractive black woman at the desk, and we start flirting. And there didn't have to be any consummation of anything. It was just like an incredible respite from the desert, the sensuality desert that I reside in puritanical Massachusetts. So I just felt so welcomed. It was just incredible. The other highlight of the trip was several days later with Sherry and a woman that she fixed me up with on Saturday afternoon, who was a granddaughter of B.B. King, one of 48 grandchildren of B.B. King. And we had hung out on Saturday afternoon, and then the three of us, me and her and Sherry, who is married, unfortunately, but does a lot on her own. The three of us, on my urging, went to Clarksdale, Mississippi. That's in the heart of the Mississippi Delta, because I knew that they had great soul and blues clubs. And there's one owned by Morgan Freeman, the great black actor who grew up in Clarksdale and is trying to revive a pretty dead town. And Morgan Freeman's place, called Ground Zero, is listed on the T-shirt that I bought as rated as the #1 blues club in the United States. And while I was there, I danced. We got there later than we should have, but it stays. Music is every night. And it was a good blues group till midnight. And I danced with Sherry and her friend. And I was feeling, I was getting a lot of female attention. And I got so much that when I went up to the bar for a few minutes by myself, this gorgeous, very young, very attractive, a light-skinned black woman started flirting with me. And then a few minutes later, I went over to buy a T-shirt. And she came over and she gave me her cell phone number, and we talked a little bit. I was in, again, seventh heaven, things falling into place. And then we were taken, after the music ended, upstairs by this guy who works for the company to see that they have private rooms there, and really nice rooms. We took some photos up there, and there's going to be a festival in mid-April, and I'm really wanting to go, and so forth. So there is a place, as Barbara Streisand and everybody else is saying, there's a place for us, somewhere a place for us, peace and quiet and open air. Anyway, from West Side Story, there's a place for me. There's a place where I can feel, reinforced, welcomed. I mean, it was only, several days. It doesn't prove anything, but it does prove that when I'm in an environment which is reinforcing, that it brings out my best stuff. It brings out my joy. It brings out my sense of love and sensuality and spontaneity. And boy, do I need it. Boy, do I need it. And I definitely maintained, I definitely reminded people at every time I could, anytime it was relevant, of the need for an Otis Redding film. And I mentioned it a lot of times. And all I'm saying is I want to be a catalyst. One last story on the Otis Redding angle related to Memphis. One of the congressmen representing representing Memphis is named Stephen Cohen, first Jewish congressman from Tennessee. And I had seen him, I think, on the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and he's brilliant. And he's my age or older, at least my age, as I believe, fourth generation Jew from Memphis. And he's very progressive. He had called for Trump's impeachment back in 2017. I wanted to see if I could meet with, not him, but somebody from his staff on, I think it was that Saturday. I was put on hold. And while I was put on hold, you're put on hold on a telephone thing. And usually you get this wonderful generic elevator music playing. And instead, what was playing? Otis Redding's Change Gonna Come. Now I'm in beyond seventh heaven. Now I'm in, I'm on a meteorite, not a meteorite. I'm on an asteroid with the Little Prince from the book The Little Prince. I'm with the Little Prince on an asteroid in outer space when I hear that. And when the woman gets on the phone, the chief of staff locally, and we made a nice phone connection, I said, I can't believe this. That was one of my favorite songs of my youth. What's going on? She said, Stephen Cohen had insisted that the music they have playing when the thing's on hold has to be music, quote, we believe in. And he believes in Otis Redding or something like that. He loves that music. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Does this mean I'm destined to work for Stephen Cohen in D.C. and have a third home in Memphis and have a fourth home in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and so forth? No. But I can fantasize. And Johnny says,
coming, but I know